Good morning. Nice that we're all back together again on this Thursday morning. My aunt passed away over the weekend, and so I'm spending today in Tekamah, Nebraska at her funeral, and I will be back with you tomorrow. I hope the test went well. If the test didn't go well, don't lose any sleep over it. You can retake it next Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. And by now, in this part of class, you've already taken the test and you've had a chance to watch the PBS NewsHour, the news summary portion of it. And so let's spend a couple minutes looking at what we're going to focus on tomorrow and next week. And that is the way that we can determine the health of our nation. This information that we want to go over this week, we're going to keep it pretty broad, but yet we're going to be specific enough that when you're out there in the real world, that when you hear information on the news, you're going to be able to make your own decision. Whether the news you're hearing, the economic news you're hearing is good news or bad news. That way you're not left to someone else's opinion. So today, let's look at the most common way we can determine the health of our nation's economy. A lot of what we're going to cover today, you already know. You covered it with Mr. Cerny. So a little bit of this might be review, and bear with me if it is review, and it's always good to hear things a couple times. Anytime you want Mr. Elsnick to stop the video, you just let him know and he can stop this video. So you have a chance to write something down. But the most common way to determine the health of our nation's economy is looking at the real GDP, the real gross domestic product. Remember the term real. Real means let's factor out inflation. Let's remind ourselves what GDP is. Remember, GDP is, looking at this formula, is looking at everything that consumers buy plus everything that government buys. And when we're talking government here, we're talking the national government, we're talking the 50 states, we're talking the thousands of local governments. And then we're also looking at what businesses buy, their investments. And then we also have to add what we sell, what we make here in the United States and sell in other countries. We have to add our exports to that. But then we also have to subtract what we buy from other countries. In other words, we have to subtract our imports. So what consumers buy, 60% of the GDP is what you and I buy. But what consumers buy, what the different governments buy, what businesses invest in, what we buy, what we sell in other countries, and then we have to subtract again what we buy made in other countries. That's our GDP. And remember, we're going to look at the real GDP, so we're factoring out inflation. Well, a safe way to look at this is simply this. We want to see our real GDP grow 3% a year. That's what we're looking for. A 3% growth in our annual real GDP. Now here's where we can measure the health of the nation. If our economy grows faster or more than 3%, we're going to experience increased inflation in our country by looking at the consumer price index. The more it grows over 3, the more the inflation. If our economy grows less than 3%, and the less it grows, the more we're going to experience unemployment. So when you're in college and you're out in the full-time working world and you hear the annual GDP announced or the quarterly GDP announced, real GDP, we want to hear 3%. And again, less than 3%, we're going to see increases in unemployment. The higher it is, the more it's above 3%, the greater the inflation. Most common way you can determine the health of our nation's economy, looking at our annual real gross domestic product. When I'm back with you tomorrow on Friday, we'll continue looking at several other ways that you can determine the health of our nation's economy. Until then, you folks have a good Thursday, and I'll see you on Friday.